You know, there's something fascinating about how we experience time, especially the way we treat the end of a month, like July. Most people assume it just drifts out. Another page turned, another cycle closed. We mentally check out saying, it's the end of the month. Like it gives us permission to relax, to coast. But what if I told you that kind of thinking is exactly why so many people miss the shift when it happens? Because we've been trained to look for change in loud, dramatic ways. Explosions, breakdowns, big announcements. We think transformation has to come with noise. But life doesn't always work like that. Sometimes, the biggest shifts come disguised as nothing special. And that's exactly what happened at the end of July. Everyone thought it would be just another closing chapter. But if you paid attention, really paid attention, you might have felt something was off. A tension you couldn't explain. Maybe your energy was inconsistent. Your sleep felt weird. Your patience was thinner. Your habits started to slip, even though you couldn't figure out why. And you tried to tell yourself, it's just the heat, or I'm just tired. But that wasn't it. It was a signal. One you weren't supposed to brush off. It was the calm before something real. We tend to equate calm with safety. If things look normal, they must be fine, right? But that's a lie comfort tells you. What we call calm is often just a pause before disruption. And if you don't train yourself to feel the quiet before the shift, you get blindsided. You get caught in the storm thinking it came out of nowhere, when in truth, it's been building for weeks. July didn't end with a bang. It ended with a whisper. A whisper that said, this is not what you think it is. And that's where people get trapped. Because it didn't come with fireworks or a breaking news headline. They missed it. They didn't realize the end of July wasn't a finish line. It was a setup. It was the moment the ground shifted under your feet, but so subtly that unless you were grounded, unless you were locked in and honest with yourself, you didn't notice it. And now you're walking into August thinking it's just another month. It's not. This isn't about paranoia. It's about awareness. You don't need to fear what's coming. You just need to be awake enough to respond to it. And that means not waiting for the world to shake you. It means recognizing that real shifts often arrive in silence, that by the time it gets loud, it's already late. The emergency doesn't start when everything breaks. It starts when you stop noticing what's changing. And right now, what's changing is everything you thought you had time to delay. All the decisions you've been putting off. All the work you've been avoiding. All the patterns you've justified because they weren't that bad. July's end is the point where that window closed, not in a tragic way, but in a clarifying one. It's like life is saying, I've given you enough warm-ups. Now the real thing begins. The people who move forward from here aren't the ones who feel the most motivated. They're the ones who finally understood the cost of drifting. They heard the silence at the end of July and chose not to ignore it. They stopped waiting for permission. They started taking ownership, not because they had the perfect plan, but because they realized that doing nothing is also a choice. And it's the most dangerous one. So if you've been feeling like something ended, but you couldn't explain what, trust that instinct. You're not imagining it. July's end wasn't soft. It was surgical. It cut off your excuses. It stripped away your illusions. And now, the only thing left to ask is, what are you going to do about it? Because you don't need more time. You need more truth. The strange thing about life is that it rarely sends warnings the way we expect. When we think of emergencies, we imagine chaos, sirens, flashing lights, something dramatic that forces us to stop and pay attention. But real life doesn't always do that, especially when it comes to the kind of emergencies that actually matter, the ones that live inside you. See, people are trained to look outside for danger. We wait for the big collapse, the job loss, the breakup, the moment where everything falls apart. But by the time it's that obvious, the damage is already done. The real warning signs, they come much earlier. They're quieter. They show up as tension in the chest, a lack of clarity, the moments when you can't focus and you don't know why. July was full of those signs, but most people missed them because they were looking for something louder. They thought, if something important is happening, I'll know it. It'll be obvious. But what if the warning doesn't look like a breakdown? What if it looks like fatigue you can't explain, or restlessness that doesn't go away, or scrolling on your phone, even though you promised yourself you'd stop? What if the emergency is that your soul's been calling for your attention, and you've been too distracted to hear it? That's what I mean when I say we've misread the signals. You thought you were just tired. You thought the tension was random, but it wasn't. It was a pattern forming. And that pattern wasn't external, it was internal. The friction was never about what's happening around you. It was about the gap between what you say you want and how you're actually living. That misalignment builds pressure, and if you ignore it long enough, it turns into something heavy: resentment, anxiety, burnout. But here's the tricky part: because it doesn't explode, you keep pushing through it. You convince yourself it's just life, that everyone feels this way, and slowly, your standards start slipping without you realizing it. This is where the real danger is. Not in some big, dramatic failure, but in quiet erosion. It's the small daily compromises. The just this once, that I'll get back on track tomorrow. And before you know it, you've adapted to a lower level of living. Not because you wanted to, but because you didn't notice the decline as it was happening. The emergency wasn't sudden, it was subtle, and that's why it's so easy to miss. But just because you missed the signal doesn't mean you're too late. That's the beautiful part. You can still wake up, you can still respond, but only if you're willing to be honest with yourself. And I'm not talking about the kind of honesty you post online or share in a journal once a month. I mean the brutal kind, the kind that forces you to ask, where have I been lying to myself? Where have I convinced myself that pretty good is enough? Where have I allowed comfort to become my excuse? Because that's what this moment is offering you. July's end wasn't a full stop. It was a question mark. And it's asking you if you're really paying attention. It's not about fear, and it's not about guilt. It's about awareness. It's about deciding to stop numbing yourself with distractions and to start recognizing that if something feels off, it probably is. And that feeling isn't trying to hurt you. It's trying to wake you. There is no growth without discomfort. And sometimes that discomfort shows up before you're ready. But that's the point. You're not supposed to be ready. You're supposed to respond anyway. Because that response, when it comes from a place of awareness, not panic, that's where your life starts to change. So if you felt even a little unsettled as July came to a close, don't run from that feeling. Don't explain it away. Lean into it. Because that was the real emergency. The quiet realization that something inside you is no longer willing to tolerate the gap between who you are and who you're meant to be. People hear the word emergency and immediately think of something outside themselves, something they need to avoid, defend against, or run from. They imagine chaos out there, but the real emergency, it's not happening out there. It's happening in here, inside you. And most people don't even realize it, because it doesn't come with shattered glass or screaming alarms. It shows up in silence, in hesitation, in avoidance. It shows up every time you wake up tired even though you slept. Every time you go through the motions, not because you want to, but because you forgot what it feels like to be lit up about anything. That's the real emergency, the quiet one inside your own life. July didn't just reveal what was happening around you. It pulled back the curtain on something far more personal, the gap between the life you're living and the truth you're not facing. When you felt pressure, it wasn't coming from the outside world. It was coming from within. That resistance, that friction, that tension you felt in your chest, in your decisions, in your relationships. That was your own system rejecting what no longer fits. That was your mind trying to hold on to comfort while your soul was screaming for change. And here's the thing about internal emergencies. They're easy to ignore because you can still function. You can still show up to work. You can still post the highlight reel. You can still smile at the right time and laugh on cue. But inside, something is disconnected, and you know it. You just don't talk about it. You tell yourself you're just busy, just tired, just overwhelmed. But that's not it. What's really happening is you've drifted too far from alignment. You're operating with strategies that no longer serve you. You're making choices that keep you safe, but not fulfilled. You're carrying standards that belong to who you used to be, not who you need to become. That's the emergency. Not the burnout, not the fatigue, not the external struggle. The emergency is your silence about it. It's how easily you've convinced yourself this is fine. That this is just what adulthood feels like. That settling is normal. But deep down you know better. There's a voice inside you that knows you're capable of more. That knows your potential is suffocating under the weight of your own avoidance. And that voice, it doesn't yell, it doesn't beg, it just waits. And every time you ignore it, it fades a little more. But July didn't let that voice fade. It brought it back. Maybe it wasn't loud, but it was present. It showed up in your decisions, in the moments when you knew you could do better, but didn't. In the late nights when your mind wandered to the version of yourself you promised you'd become. That wasn't nostalgia. That was your inner compass trying to wake you up. And this is where most people panic. Because they think, if I feel this lost, something must be wrong with me. No. If you feel this lost, it means something is finally right. It means the numbness is wearing off. It means the truth is getting louder than the lies you've been telling yourself to get through the day. That is not weakness. That is clarity. And it's one of the most powerful things you can experience if you're willing to stop running from it. So no, the emergency isn't about everything falling apart. It's not about life attacking you. It's not about fear. The emergency is the fact that you've been tolerating misalignment like it's normal. That you've accepted average energy, half-hearted focus, and dull momentum like it's the cost of being human. It's not. That's the cost of forgetting who you are. And July's end wasn't just a reminder. It was a call-out. This is the moment to return to your center. To realign not by force, but by truth. To stop pretending the noise outside is the biggest threat, when in reality, the loudest danger is the quiet life you're settling for. Pressure has a bad reputation. We talk about it like it's the enemy. Something to avoid, something to manage, something to escape. But pressure isn't the problem. It never was. The problem is how we interpret it. Most people feel pressure and assume something's wrong. But in reality, pressure is often the most honest mirror life gives us. It doesn't lie. It doesn't sugarcoat. It doesn't flatter your ego. It simply reflects exactly where you're out of sync, where your actions don't match your ambitions, where your words don't align with your behavior, and where your potential is being left untouched. If July taught us anything, it's this: pressure doesn't break you, it reveals you. It strips away the comfort zone. It interrupts the illusion that you're doing enough. It doesn't wait for your permission. And if you were paying attention in those final days of July, you probably felt it. The world didn't suddenly get heavier. You just became more aware of how much weight you were already carrying. The distractions started to wear thin. The little lies you told yourself didn't hold up as well. And the routines that once gave you structure, they started to feel like cages. But here's the part people miss. Feeling that pressure wasn't failure. It wasn't a sign that you were falling behind. It was a signal that you've reached the edge of who you've been. It was life calling you forward. And when you resist that call, the pressure intensifies. Not because you're weak, but because the version of you that was once enough no longer is. You've outgrown it. And the longer you try to shrink yourself to fit back into an outdated identity, the more misaligned you'll feel. Think about that. When things used to feel easy, it wasn't because life was simple. It was because your expectations were lower. Your goals were smaller. Your standards were softer. But now you want more. You've tasted the possibility of a different life. One with clarity, with purpose, with direction. And the second you opened that door, you created a new baseline for yourself. That's why pressure showed up. Not as punishment, but as preparation. It was there to test your integrity, to see if your actions match your ambition, to see if you'll back down or level up. People think transformation happens in peaceful moments, but it doesn't. Real change shows up in the friction. When you're forced to confront the difference between who you are and who you need to become. And that confrontation, that's pressure. That's growth demanding a decision. And you can't intellectualize your way out of it. You either answer it or you don't. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. Pressure exposes every shortcut you've been taking, every habit you thought you could get away with, every corner you've cut in silence. And at first, that exposure can feel humiliating. It can feel like you're falling apart. But that's not what's happening. You're not breaking. You're shedding. The identity that can't handle the next chapter is falling away. And that's not loss. That's liberation. But you have to lean into it. You have to stop praying for things to get easier and start preparing to get stronger. You have to see pressure not as a curse, but as a gift, because without it, you'd keep living inside the illusion that you're doing just fine. And just fine is where potential goes to die. That's where dreams become regrets. And that's the one weight you don't want to carry. So if July pushed you, if it stretched you, if it felt like life was tightening the screws, good. That's your mirror. That's reality checking your story. That's life saying, I'm not here to comfort you. I'm here to call you. And if you're brave enough to look into that mirror, without flinching, without defending, without running, what you'll see is the exact version of yourself you've been avoiding, and the one you were meant to become. There's a moment, and most people don't even notice when it happens, where what used to carry you forward just stops working. The routines, the mindset, the momentum you built in the past, they run out of fuel. And it doesn't mean they were wrong. It just means they've reached their expiration date. That's what July did. It didn't just test you. It cleared the stage. It collapsed the old momentum, the kind that helped you survive, but isn't strong enough to take you where you actually want to go. And if you're still trying to rely on those same patterns, that same version of effort, that same predictable rhythm, you're going to feel like you're stuck, not because you lack discipline, but because the engine you're using isn't built for this road anymore. Think about how often we stay loyal to old strategies just because they're familiar. You tell yourself, this has worked before, it got me results, and maybe it did. But you're not the same person you were back then. Your goals are different, the stakes are higher, and deep down, you know it. You can feel that pull, that restlessness that says you can't keep doing things halfway. July was the moment that showed you exactly where your momentum was fake. It revealed the habits that looked good from the outside, but were hollow underneath. The things you kept doing just to say, see, I'm still working, even though you knew they weren't moving the needle. And here's the truth. July didn't punish you, it exposed you. It didn't bring chaos, it brought clarity. But clarity can feel like chaos when you've been hiding behind motion for too long. You can fool people with effort. You can even fool yourself for a while. But when the old momentum dies, when what used to push you forward suddenly feels heavy and unmotivating, you're forced to ask the one question most people avoid: am I really committed or just comfortable? Because let's be real, half efforts are seductive. You can put in 70%, stay busy, and convince yourself you're grinding. But deep down, there's a voice that knows. It knows when you're choosing easy over necessary. It knows when you're recycling plans instead of rewriting them. And that voice, it doesn't scream. It just quietly makes you feel disconnected. That disconnection isn't depression. It's not burnout. It's not confusion. It's your inner system letting you know you're operating on expired effort. Now, here's where people get stuck. When that collapse happens, they try to fix it by doubling down on what already failed. They cling to the comfort of old structures, hoping that with just a little more willpower, they can reignite the flame. But you can't relight a match that already burned out. What you need is new friction, a new level of ownership. And that means letting go of the identity that was tied to the momentum that just collapsed. That's hard, because it feels like failure. It feels like starting over. But it's not. It's a reset. It's a clean slate disguised as loss. It's life forcing you to pause, not to punish you, but to ask you, do you really want this? And are you ready to become the person who can actually carry it? You don't grow by polishing what's outdated. You grow by shedding what no longer fits. And sometimes that means admitting that the version of you that got you here doesn't have what it takes to take you there. That's not shameful. That's growth. That's awareness. That's the kind of truth most people never reach because they're too busy chasing the illusion of progress. So if you felt like the air got thinner, like the momentum dropped, like your engine stalled at the end of July, don't panic. That's exactly what was supposed to happen. You're not being held back. You're being emptied. Emptied of what no longer serves. Emptied of what's too small. Emptied so you can finally fill yourself with something real. Something aligned. Something built for where you're going next. And it's only when you stop clinging to the momentum that no longer works that the real movement can finally begin. Most people think August is just the next month, a continuation, a time to settle back in after the chaos of summer, maybe reset a little, get back into routine. But that thinking, that mindset, that's exactly what blinds you. Because August isn't just the next chapter, it's the activation point. The aftermath of July wasn't the end of something. It was the doorway to everything. But only if you can see it. Only if you can respond. We've been talking about how July exposed misalignment, broke down old momentum, and held up a mirror to the habits we've outgrown. And now, here's August, sitting in front of you, pretending to be a quiet month, a chance to recover. But don't be fooled. This isn't recovery time. This is decision time. This is the moment where you either re-engage or retreat. You either act with intention, or you fall back into reaction. And here's the thing. No one's coming to push you. No one's going to bang on your door and drag you into the life you were built for. That's on you. That's the shift that August demands. You can't wait for motivation. You can't rely on emotion. This month isn't about feeling ready. It's about acting like you already are, because everything that was stripped away at the end of July created space, and what you choose to fill that space with will determine the next season of your life. Some people will hear that and start planning, start mapping out goals, writing to-do lists. But this isn't about more structure, it's about more honesty. Can you finally admit what you've been avoiding? Can you look at the gap between what you say matters and what you're actually doing? And not look away this time. Because August isn't going to wait for you to feel comfortable. It's going to move. Life is moving. And if you don't start choosing with clarity, you're going to get swept up in someone else's story. You've already seen what doesn't work. You've already felt the weight of misalignment. That's what July was for. That discomfort you felt, it wasn't random. It was information. It was feedback. And now you have a choice. You can take that feedback and get sharper, or you can ignore it and start the cycle all over again. There is no in between. Not now. Not anymore. August has a different energy. It's not soft. It's not patient. It's not going to carry you. It's going to challenge you. It's going to hand you opportunities disguised as discomfort. You're going to feel resistance. Not because you're on the wrong path, but because you're finally stepping onto the right one. Growth always resists. Truth always demands. And that's what this moment is about. So what do you do with it? You start moving, not perfectly, not with some grand 12-week strategy. You just start. You commit, not to the outcome, but to the process. You build momentum, not by waiting, but by working. You trust the tension. You let it shape you. You stop asking for signs, because the sign already came. It was the pressure, the frustration, the discontent that rose up in July and refused to be ignored. That was your signal. This is your chance. August is the launch pad. It doesn't care what you did last month. It doesn't care how far off track you got. It only cares about what you're going to do now. And if you've been waiting for the moment, waiting for the permission, waiting for the timing to be right, this is it. Not because everything's perfect, but because you finally see clearly, and clarity is enough. So no, August isn't here to give you rest. It's here to give you power. But you only get that power if you're willing to act like everything matters again. Like your future is not a concept. It's a countdown. And every day you hesitate is a day you can't get back. Because this isn't a recovery. It's a reintroduction.